Hello everyone, so today I'm going to set up my bullet journal for July, and this video is very kindly sponsored by Identity. Identity is basically a home screen for your browser where you can organize your websites into little tiles, kind of like the apps on your phone. This makes it super easy to find your favorite websites because you can also put them into different categories and add favorites. So for example, I have a category for YouTube, for my Etsy shop, for entertainment, and it's just really easy to find what you're looking for. You can also just click on one of your tiles and Identity automatically fills in your username and password, which is super useful. They also have a little notes section on the side for to-dos and other notes, and it's completely free to sign up. So if you want to check it out, the link is in the description, and thank you again to Identity for sponsoring this video. First, as always, I'm going to show you a little flip through of my June pages, and I'm also showcasing your recreations I was tagged in on the side here. And yeah, I really enjoyed using my spreads this month, although I had to skip a week just because I had a lot to do, so I didn't really get to create a weekly spread, but this one is the one I'm currently using, and then I will include the next week in my July setup. This month I actually wanted to do a cotton theme, which I guess isn't super summery, but I just really wanted to do it, so I picked out some colors, and I'm also using more than I usually do because there's a bit more drawing involved. And I actually ended up not using black at all, so that was definitely a bit of a challenge, but I really like the end result, so I hope you enjoy the video, and let's get started. Last month I did a work calendar on the first page, and I really liked using it. It was just really good to plan things out, so I wanted to include it again for July, and I used this kind of purplish blue for a lot of the titles, and then this very light peachy pink for usually the backgrounds or just to give a bit more color. Then I'm using a bit of a darker peachy tone for the lines of the calendar, and I did the same layout as last month, so the individual days are 2 grid spaces wide and 3 grid spaces tall, and then the first line is used for the dates, so basically I have 4 spaces left, and I just use a color code for different types of work I have to do. Next, I'm using a white gel pen for the weekdays, which I forgot to show in the beginning, but I always leave a list of all the products I use in the description, so you can always check that out if you're curious. Then I'm writing the dates with this darker orange shade, and I always like to use both spaces even if it's just one number, because I think it looks more clean that way. I also used that same shade to cross out the last days of June on the top. Next, I wanted to give the calendar a border with that light blue shade, but I accidentally messed it up a little bit, so I corrected that with the white gel pen again. And just as a heads up, I made a lot more corrections and mistakes this time because I didn't fully plan out my spreads beforehand. But anyway, next to the calendar, I wanted to draw some little cotton doodles, and I wanted to keep them as simple as possible, so I experimented a lot with how to simplify them, and I really like how they ended up turning out. You're gonna see me do the same doodles a bunch of times, so hopefully you can see how I draw them. I basically always do the stem first, then the shape of the leaves and the cotton itself, and then I outline the leaves and the cotton with a darker shade. I also use the light blue to draw little stars and dots because it just looks really cute and I love that color combination. Here I'm adding my color code, so I just picked 4 of the colors. So for example, I currently work on YouTube, my Etsy shop, my freelance job I do on the side, and also on other freelance projects, so I can fill in each day with the coding colors and just plan out what I need to work on. Then I felt like the border looked a bit odd, so I also added it to the right side and underneath the calendar to just kind of balance it out a bit, and I also corrected the shape on the left with the white gel pen again. On the bottom, I also wanted to include my little social media trackers for YouTube and Instagram, so I did 2 little boxes, and I used the light blue for the background of the title and also for the border, and then I write down the first and last date of July so that I can see how our little community grows over time. I'm using the white gel pen again to write the title, and I feel like it doesn't really get picked up on camera too well, but it is actually pretty easy to read it in real life. Next to the trackers, I'm drawing another cotton plant, and I just think they look super cute and fluffy, so I'm really happy with them. Now moving on to my cover page, as you can see I sketched it out before filming because I wanted to make sure the placement was perfect, and here you can see my process for drawing the cotton a little bit better. So like I said, I start off with the stems and I make sure that they're not too thick and they have like little leaves or like spikes on them, especially where they branch out, and I just also added them along the stem. Next I used this light yellow for the leaves, and I think they're actually brown, but I wanted to add some more color to the doodles, and I tend to go for more like warmer color palettes. Then I'm using that really light peachy pink shade, and you can layer this one really well because it's so light, so I ended up going over it a couple of times, and again I think this just adds more color and gives the illustration a lot more warmth, which I really like. For the outlines of the leaves, I'm using the orange shade, which is almost like a dark yellow, and I just didn't want to use black for some reason. I think it would just be a bit too harsh. Then I went in with the darker peachy pink for the cotton, and they have this kind of like diamond shape in the middle because the cotton grows in these little fluffy sections, and that's kind of where they meet in the middle, if that makes sense. So I tried to make these round shapes more obvious just so that it doesn't look like a blob. I also tried to show these shapes in the outline, so it's kind of like a simple cloud with 4 curves, and I think that makes them look extra cute and fluffy. Now I did want to color in the background in that same light blue shade, but I didn't want it to be super streaky, so I thought I would use some colored inks. And before I did that, I also wanted to outline the whole illustration in white so that the edges are a bit more protected from the ink, because the markers are actually water-based, so they would bleed into the ink, and this just creates a bit of a border from the water. In hindsight, I could probably still have used the marker, but it just doesn't layer super well, so I thought I would try to paint it instead. While the gel pen dried, I used some washi tape to make the edges nice and clean, which honestly didn't work super well, but I was still happy with it. Now for the inks, I'm using a purple and a blue shade to try to come close to the color of the marker, and I just use a drop of each one. You really don't need a lot, and then you just mix it with water, so the more water, the lighter the color will be. I tested it on a piece of paper, and I think it's actually really close to the marker, so I just went in and tried to make it as even as possible, which honestly isn't super easy because these inks dry really quickly and they can kind of leave like borders, so they're not like watercolor because they also dry waterproof, so you can't really reactivate the paint, but you just have to work a bit more quickly, and I think I did an okay job. Also, the journal I use from Original Olive has 160 GSM paper, which is really thick, so the paper can definitely take some water, although it did end up warping a little bit, which you'll see later on. Once the paint was completely dry and the paper had flattened out, I removed the washi tape, and the ink did leak out in some spots, but I actually didn't mind it. And just as a side note, sorry about the lighting, it had gotten really dark outside all of a sudden, but it got better after that. I just cleaned up some of the edges with my white gel pen, and I also used it to draw some more little stars and dots all around the cotton. For the title, I'm using the orange shade again because I think it's just a really nice contrast to the blue background. Now here's a little close-up. I actually really like that I didn't use black at all. It's definitely different from my usual setups, but it's a nice challenge for sure. Here you can see how it looks on the next page. So the paper did warp a little bit, not as bad as I thought honestly, but I did decide to glue it to the next page so that it just looks a little bit more clean, and I'm using my glue roller all around the edges and then making sure that it lays nice and flat. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to my habit trackers as always. Now here's where I didn't really plan out my layout, so I actually ended up covering this title as well as a quote and another title later on, because I felt like this yellow didn't really work too well as a background, so you can just kind of ignore that part for now. I did decorate the title with more cotton doodles on the side, which I think looks super cute. This month I'm tracking 6 daily habits, and I'm not always super consistent with tracking whatsoever, but I do enjoy having them just to keep me accountable. So first I used the light peachy pink as a background for the titles, and I did leave some space between the first and the last 3 because I wanted to add a quote in between, and then I'm using the blue for the weekdays and the orange to write the habits. For the outline of the calendar, I'm using the darker pink again, and I decided to use the thicker side, but I kind of regret not using a ruler because it does look a little bit messy, but I fixed it a bit later on. Here I wanted to write a quote, so I found one that says, "Live life in warm yellows," which I thought was very fitting for summer. But first I'm drawing more cotton on the side so that the background is completely dry before I write on it. I actually do think the yellow looks really cute for the title and everything, but it didn't really fit in with the color palette of the cover page, so that's the main reason I ended up redoing it differently. Here I'm again crossing out the last days of June in my habit trackers. All the way at the bottom I'm including my weekly trackers, so this time I have 5 habits, and I used the light peachy pink again for the backgrounds, and then filled in the empty space next to it with another larger cotton plant. I really enjoyed drawing the cotton because you can be a bit messy and it still looks cute, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and I just love those kind of doodles. So then for my weekly habits, I'm tracking watering my plants, making my weekly spreads in my bullet journal, doing an artist study because I want to work on my art skills a bit more, posting on Instagram, and then lastly working out 2 to 3 times a week. So I did actually forget to include the actual trackers, so here I'm drawing a circle for each week, and then once I complete a habit I can just color it in. Next, I wanted to write a title above the weekly trackers because there was kind of an awkward gap there, but again, I ended up covering this one up as well because there was just a bit too much yellow. So I have this page that I cut out of my old journal, and it's really useful because you can just kind of cut it to size and then cover things up if you don't like something, and that's exactly what I did here. So I covered the title for the habits and for the weekly trackers, as well as the quote in the middle. It's definitely not perfect because the paper is quite thick, but I think it still looks pretty good. For the titles, I changed the background to the blue with white lettering on top because it matches the cover page a lot better. I used the light peachy pink again for the quote because that's what I had used before, and then I wrote the quote again with that orange color, so I only changed the background. Then I just did the same style of header for the weekly tracker title, and I'm honestly much more happy with how it turned out, so definitely don't be afraid to change things up if you don't like them. On the right page, I wanted to make a section to keep track of my Etsy orders because I do enjoy writing things down physically a lot of times. So I did the same sort of header again, like for my habits. And by the way, I also made a new sticker that's available in my Etsy shop because I had this idea for cotton, but with cats as the cotton, if that makes sense. And I just thought it was so adorable. So if you want to check that out or any of my other stickers, I have the link to my shop in my description as well. For this section, I split it into a few columns so that I can write down the date of the order, the articles that were bought, when it's due for shipping, and when I have completed it. I can definitely do all of these things in the actual Etsy app, but again, I do like to write things down sometimes, so I thought I would try it out and see if I like it. I drew the lines for the border freehand again, but I ended up cleaning them up later with a ruler because it just looked a little bit too chaotic for me. Underneath this section, I also wanted some space for my YouTube to-dos, so I made a smaller section where I can just write down ideas or what needs to be finished when and things like that. Recently, I've been really enjoying using a super light marker to color in every second line in sections like this because it brings a bit more color into the layout without being too distracting, so I definitely did this quite a lot this month. Here I'm cleaning up the lines for my Etsy section since I liked it better with a ruler, and then next to my YouTube section I drew 2 more cotton plants to tie it in with the rest of the spread. So that's how these 2 pages turned out. I think the colors work a lot better like this, so I'm really happy I ended up fixing the titles, and I hope you like them as well. So let's go ahead and move on to my first weekly spread of July. If you've seen my videos before, you know that I like to keep my weekly spreads pretty simple. So first I made a mini calendar on the top left because I always forget the date, so it's really nice to have an overview of the whole month. I have definitely done this kind of layout a couple of times before, so the days here are more horizontal, they're placed towards the middle of the spread, and there are 4 on the left page and then 3 on the right. First I colored in the background again with that light peachy pink, and now I'm making the borders, this time with a ruler, and the sections for the days are 8 grid spaces tall with 1 in between each of them. And these ones are 16 spaces wide, but you can definitely vary them depending on how much planning space you need. Next I'm writing the weekdays and the dates in the orange shade to keep things consistent all throughout the setup. I also decided to add a little star and some dots in the blue shade on the bottom right of each section so that the colors are a bit more cohesive. On the left side I'm adding 2 small sections, and I used the blue and white combination for the titles so that they're kind of visually separate from the daily sections. The first one is for my to-dos for my freelance job, and the second one is for planning my workouts. Underneath that I'm adding another cotton plant, and in general I always like to make sure the amount of doodles is kind of similar in my spreads because I feel like it makes them look a bit more cohesive overall. Next I'm again coloring in every second line of my sections with that light peachy pink, and I just think it looks really good and more full, so then I do the same thing for the rest of my daily sections for Friday through Sunday on the right page, and I'm also adding a section for next week all the way at the bottom. What I really like about layouts like this one is that you can add as many additional sections as you want, or just fill the rest with doodles. So sometimes I feel like I need more sections and sometimes I feel like I don't need any. So for this one I decided to fill the rest of the space on the right with more cotton doodles. I think this balanced out the more structured part of the spread really well, and I love how it turned out. So here's the finished weekly spread. I just really love the colors without any black. I think it actually looks really summery, even though it's not really a summery theme at all. So I'm really happy with how it turned out, and let's go ahead and do a little flip through. I usually tend to plan out my setups a lot more these days, but I did this one a bit more spontaneous, so I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but I actually really love it. So I hope you guys enjoyed planning with me as always. Thank you so much again to Identity for sponsoring this video and supporting my channel. Definitely let me know if you have any new theme ideas or video ideas. I love reading your comments. Also tag me in your recreations on Instagram, and consider subscribing to my channel if you like my videos. So again, thank you guys for watching, and I hope I'll see you again next time. Bye!